Okay, hey everyone. I just wanted to do a couple of division problems and estimating from the chapter that we've been doing, just so that parents and students who need more practice understand how we would be doing it and tips that would help them the best to understand the concepts. So I'm just going to show you the way that I've taught it to the kids and the way that it's in the book. And hopefully we've tried to do it step by step so that the students can follow steps. So let me go ahead and start with the first one. So the first 6 problems on that really hard test were all about estimating. So they had to look at the divisor and the dividend and do estimating to figure out, okay, what would the answer be? Which is super hard for 5th graders. So let's say we have one in the book that says 234 divided by 41. So, and I've told the kids this, it doesn't matter if you do it when you're estimating. You can either do it this way and change the numbers, or you can set it up like a long division problem, and they should know how to do that because we've talked about it quite a bit. So if we do 41 into 234, okay, this is step 1. The very first thing they do is they're going to round the divisor, the 41. So we always look at the tens number, and to figure out if we round it down to 40 or up to 50, because we round it to the nearest 10, the way you do that is you look at the number to the right, which is 1. If it's 4 or less, let it rest. If it's 5 or above, give it a shove. So it's 1, so they should know it's going to rest at 40. So I have them write 40 below the 41, because that's going to be our rounded estimate. Okay, step 2, we are going to underline the 4, and we're going to underline the first 2 numbers in 234. So we're underlining 23, even though the number's 234, we're just looking at the hundreds place and the tens place. Now, and the kids can use a multiplication chart for this, and they all have one on their desks. We want to find out what is the closest number to 23 that 4 will go into. So looking on a multiplication chart or thinking of the multiples in our head, it goes 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. So now I've gone past 23 to 24, but because 23 is closer to 24 than it is to 20, we would say, okay, this is the closest number to 23 that 4 will go into. So if we make that 24 and every other number to the right is a 0, now this is something they can solve mentally, because they know that 24 divided by 4 is 6. And in a division problem, if you have a 0 here and a 0 here, zeros for every 1 0 on the divisor side, you can cross out or cancel a 0 on the dividend. So we can cross 1 out here and 1 out here, so it would still be 6. So that is how I'm teaching them how to do estimation. It gets complicated because, like on the test, we had one where it was like 49,700 divided by 25. And the problem with that is a lot of the kids would look at this and they would round that up to 30, because that's what I've taught them. But in the book, the math curriculum, they want kids to think, okay, I already know my multiples of 25, which some of them don't. But this is what I've taught them. Oh, you can count by quarters, right? Because if you count quarters and you're counting money, you'd go 25, 50, 75 cents, $1, and you can keep going. So you do know your multiples of 25, and the book thinks that they know the multiples of 25, so they're looking at this like, don't round it up to 30. Instead, do your multiples of 25 until you get to the closest number to 49. So if you're counting by quarters, obviously, and you went 25, 50 cents, 75 cents, $1, they're supposed to, in their head, be like, oh, 49 is super close to 50, which would mean if I rounded that to 50, because 25 would go to 50, and I made every number to the right 0, then I can do 25 into 50,000, and that would be 25 into 50 is twice, and then there's 3 zeros left. So the book thinks they know how to do that, but like I said, it's confusing because most of them will try rounding that number because most of the problems are like that. So the next thing that they had to do on the test is division problems. And like I said, they're really big division problems. So for some of the kids, it's just remembering the steps. So I'm going to show you how I've taught it to the kids that hopefully will make sense to you, and you can help them when you are making sure they kind of know what they're doing. Okay, so let's do 53 into 1272. Now, all of the kids know that the steps to long division are divide, multiply, subtract, bring it down. You start over. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring it down. They all know that. And they also all know that the way that we start this, and this is what I say, I don't know my 53 times tables. Do you guys? No, nobody knows their 53 times tables because after you do 2 or 3 times, it's really hard to figure out. So we do the same thing we do when we estimate. We're going to look at 53 and say, okay, well, first off, 53 will not go into 1. 53 will not go into 12, but 53 will go into 127. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start at 53 into 127. So we're going to look at the 53, and we're going to round it to the nearest 10. So 53 to the nearest 10 would be, they'd end up with 50 because that's closer to 50 than 60. And some of them are like, but why do we have to do this sometimes and not other times? And I keep telling them because sometimes it's obvious. Like we can tell if it's 53 into 54, that's obvious. They all know it's only going to go one time. But when we get here where we have a big divisor and a big dividend, and we can't tell how many times it will go in, that is when we round and we do the multiples. So let me show you what I mean by that. 53 would round down to 50. So we're going to estimate about how many times it's going to go into 127 by writing the multiples of 5 over here. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. And we add our zeros because these are tens numbers we're doing. And then what we do is we compare the 127 that we're dividing into with the multiples that we estimated on the board here. So based upon this, I'm going to look at this and say, if I did times 3, it's going to be too big because it's 127. But times 2 it would be about 100. So that's what we're going to go for. And they should all know that the 2 has to go above the 7 because we're dividing into 127. Some of them put the 2 up here, but so we've really talked about that a lot. And then we do 53 times 2, which when they do that, they'll get 3 times 2 is 6, 5 times 2 is 10. Then the next step is subtract. 7 minus 1 is 6, bring 2 minus 0 is 2. And then the last step's bring down the next number. So now same thing, they've got to start over with divide. 53 into 212. So once again, they're going to look over here at the multiples they wrote to kind of estimate how many times will this go into this. So the closest to 212 is 200. It might end up being too big, but that's why we try it, and sometimes they have to adjust. So 1, 2, that's times 4. So let's try it, and then they do their work over here. 53 times 4, that ends up being 12, 20, 21. And that ends up being exactly 212. So they know that 4 times 53 is 212. Last steps are subtract, nothing to bring down, and that's our final answer. So we have gone through tons of these in class, and we've practiced them, but obviously these are hard concepts and they have to learn the steps, and it's just difficult for them. They're 5th graders. So if you want to go over it, with your child. We're going to retake, we're going to do it on paper next week. And for the ones that were super hard, that we're going to go over the concept before we retake it. So hopefully that will help. If the scores are still, if everyone still is really struggling and doing poorly, we'll do like some type of extra credit or bonus work to help them out. So hopefully that helps. Thanks, guys.